Blimpie Subs is a submarine sandwich chain that opened in 1964. Thank you for your suggestions.
Our front door, our backyard, our pastime, our heart and soul. Blimpie has been a part of America's tradition for over 40 years. Our subs are made with fresh baked breads, quality meats and cheeses sliced to order, with tasty toppings and delicious dressings you love so much. Taste the difference freshness makes. Yesterday's traditions are still today's. Blimpie, America's sub shop.
One night in 1964, Tony Kanza and his best friend from high school, Peter DiCarlo, went to a party in Jersey City and ran into another high school chum, Angelo Baldassare. The conversation turned to this sandwich joint in Point Pleasant that had a sandwich called the Submarine that people loved. In Jersey City and Hoboken, we had hero sandwiches, which were mostly meatballs or sausage and peppers. The next morning, they drove down to this place, mentioned Kanza. Called Mike's Subs, it made sandwiches from Italian cold cuts, shredded lettuce, sliced tomatoes, oil and vinegar on soft bread. People were lined up for it, Kanza recalls. It had a unique taste and a mouth-watering sensation. On the way back, we said, let's open a sandwich place. The only problem was, we had no money. They also had no name. Leaving through a dictionary starting with A, Kanza stopped halfway through the B's when he saw Blimp. It's shaped like a sandwich, he thought, and Blimp needs an airbase. The three partners borrowed $2,000 from a friend and $500 from a jukebox operator and opened the first Blimpie base. The latter word was dropped within a year at the corner of 7th and Washington Streets in Hoboken. They first sought the blessing of the owner of Mike's Subs, who said the stores were far enough apart that there was business enough for both. The friends had no money for ads, bunting, or flyers, yet on opening day, Saturday, April 4th, 1964, the three men sliced cold cuts, assembled sandwiches, and literally rang up customers for 12 hours non-stop. The day's receipts, $265, sounds paltry until you consider that most sandwiches cost 35 to 50 cents. Their biggest dream was to open 10 stores. Within 90 days, they opened a second and third. Suppliers were excited to see how much bread and meat we were selling, Kanza says, but instead of paying their bills, they funneled their cash flow into opening more stores. The original Blimpie was an instant hit, and before long, customers began asking about starting up franchises. The first franchise was sold to a friend in Western New York for $600 during the company's first year of operation. In 1965, Baldassare left the company to start his own food service supply firm. Kanza and DiCarlo decided to expand into New York City, beginning with a store on 55th Street in Manhattan. By 1967, there were 10 Blimpies in the chain, 4 of which were owned by the company's 2 remaining founders. Unfortunately, Kanza and DiCarlo were not experienced businessmen, and in spite of the chain's rapid growth and good sales volumes, profits were difficult to make. To keep the company afloat, the partners sold the 4 stores they owned and began to concentrate primarily on franchising. By the mid-1970s, Kanza felt the time was right to introduce Blimpie Subs to the South. Partner DiCarlo, however, was against the move. This disagreement eventually led to the split between the two men. In 1976, Blimpie was divided into 2 separate entities, with both retaining rights to the Blimpie trademark. During the late 1970s, Kanza was willing to sell franchises anywhere there was interested franchisees. Blimpie began selling franchises both for individual stores as well as for whole territories. Unfortunately, many of these new franchises were rather isolated from the rest of the chain, and some of the benefits of franchise arrangements, chain-wide advertising for example, had little effect in those locations. Although the chain was growing rapidly, several of the newer stores failed. By 1983, International Blimpie's annual revenues was approaching $1 million, and Blimpie's franchises totaled 150. Kanza took the company public that year with the modest initial over-the-counter offering of 90 cents per share. Over the next few years, Blimpie embarked on a diversification program that failed miserably. Kanza began to feel that there was no future in submarine sandwiches. At the same time, he longed for the kind of respect that comes only to real restaurateurs, not fast food moguls. In 1984, Kanza opened the Border Cafe, a tablecloth restaurant serving southwestern cuisine on Manhattan's swanky Upper East Side. Although the Border Cafe did reasonably well at first, the shift in focus proved to be a major blunder. In October of 1986, meanwhile, the Blimpie's chain was stagnating. The number of outlets was stalled at about 200. In Manhattan, the company's birthplace, the Blimpie name suffered severe image problems. In the early days, the company had not been particularly selective as to who could get a franchise. In addition, its early franchise contracts allowed operators quite a bit of latitude in how the restaurants were to be run. This led to a degree of uniformity among stores far below that of other national fast food chains, not to mention a reputation for questionable sanitation standards. In 1987, the company celebrated the opening of the 50th Blimpie store in the Atlanta area by giving away 25,000 free sandwiches to customers there. By 1988, Blimpie's management reevaluated its business model. They identified 4 components that needed to be addressed: a lack of goals, poor use of financial resources, low employee morale, and procrastination. Blimpie launched a quality control program aimed at cleaning up its 140 New York restaurants, which had long been sources of embarrassment to the chain. At the same time, Kanza continued in his efforts to improve relations with franchisees, many of whom had become disgruntled over the last decade. In 1989, Blimpie began testing a new low-calorie menu in the hope of attracting a bigger share of the increasingly health-conscious American public. The new menu, called Blimpie Light, included a variety of tuna, crab, chicken, and turkey-based items in both salad and pita bread sandwich form. The Blimpie chain continued to grow steadily through the early 1990s. Much of this growth was fueled by the company's area developer program, in which franchise rights were sold for an entire area to a developer, who then sub-franchised those rights to individual operators. In 1991, Blimpie unveiled its Quick Bite menu in response to the appearance of value menus in many fast food establishments, including arch-rival Subway. By the beginning of 1992, there were Blimpie restaurants in 27 states. That year, the chain passed the 500-unit mark, and the company changed its name to Blimpie International, Inc. By 1993, there were 670 locations. During this time, Blimpie's franchises began appearing in a variety of non-traditional locations, such as convenience stores, as well as college campuses. In 1994, the 800th Blimpie in Iron City, Michigan was opened. They also introduced a new concept, the kiosk. These kiosks could serve 4 types of sandwiches, drinks, and side orders, and was designed for use at stadiums, fairs, and other special events. Another idea was a movable display cart, suitable for high-traffic areas such as airports, college campuses, and concerts. The next year, they were able to surpass the 1,000 store mark. Almost 2 years of in-house development, Blimpie launched Pasta Central in 1999. It was to be co-branded with Blimpie Subs shops. By 2001, the growth rate in the US slowed and the company looked to open internationally. There were 1,853 locations, with only 61 overseas locations in 15 countries. The company was doing $300 million in sales per year. Around this time, however, growth had slowed for the company and revenue started to fall. During one 12-month period from mid-2000 to mid-2001, the company closed 155 underperforming Blimpie outlets. 70% of which were in non-traditional locations. The Blimpie chain began receiving a revamping that involved menu upgrades, more extensive point-of-sale merchandising, and an overhaul of the decor. In 2002, a private investor group led by Jeffrey Endervelt, a Blimpie sub-franchisee, agrees to take Blimpie International private in a $25.7 million transaction. In 2005, Blimpie created a creepy, faceless sandwich mascot called Blimpy Guy. He would be paired in commercials with NASCAR legend Jeff Gordon in an unsuccessful ad campaign that few remember. In 2006, Kahala Corp acquired Blimpie, and it became the 10th brand franchise by the franchisor. By the time it had already lost over 200 locations. During the second year of its ownership, it lost an additional 20%. It turns out that Kahala also owns several other franchise companies, including Pinkberry. In 10 years, between 2001 and 2011, 60% of the Blimpie locations closed, and its sales declined by 60%. By 2011, there were only 739 stores left, and revenue was down to just over $110 million. In 2016, MTY Food Group Inc. struck a deal valued at more than $300 million to acquire Arizona-based Kahala Brands Limited and its 2,900 locations in 25 countries. By 2023, the number had dwindled down to about 200 locations. However, if you count the number of locations listed on the Blimpie app, there are only 85 left as of February of 2024. You can find Blimpies open in 23 states across the US. The majority are in Virginia, New York, Michigan, Idaho, Georgia, and New Jersey. So what do you remember about this place? Leave a comment or a suggestion for a future video below. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.
Bringing back memories from the good old days. That's super cool, man.